Hello, my name is Karen Ade, and I love folklore. I have always been fascinated by mythology and fairy tales, as well as our modern equivalent, urban legends. From ghost stories to cryptids to your uncle's roommate's brother who totally died from not forwarding that email, I find the myth and lore that people create to explain and spice up our world really fascinating. Today, I'm going to be exploring some urban legends local to the town of Medfield, Massachusetts. This is Medfield is located in Norfolk County, Massachusetts. It was first settled in 1649 and was incorporated in 1651. It is on Neponset land and borders the Charles River. It's home to some very interesting urban legends, including a witch, little mischievous creatures that live in the woods, and a haunted abandoned mental hospital, which is where we'll be going first. Medfield State Hospital opened in 1892 as the first facility in Massachusetts for the chronically mentally ill. It was also the first asylum built using the cottage plan, which meant that instead of one large facility, many smaller buildings arranged like a village made up the campus. The idea was for the hospital to function like a town, so there was also a small farm attached, and patients would help with the harvesting. There were a variety of other jobs that could be held by patients well enough to work. This was done in order to give the patients structure and help them feel productive, as well as helping the self sufficiency of the hospital. It was first named Medfield Insane Asylum and then changed its name to Medfield State Hospital in 1914. During the flu outbreak in 1918, there were so many deaths at the hospital that Vine Lake Cemetery in town requested that the hospital stop burying patients there, as there wasn't enough room when combined with the deaths from the town proper. So the hospital made its own graveyard. Originally, the graves were only designated by numbers, but in 2005, the town undertook the project of placing the correct names and dates on each of the grave markers. During the Kennedy administration, Congress passed a law that legally required people receiving mental health treatment to be housed in the least restrictive environment possible, so most patients were moved to community based halfway houses. Medfield State Hospital was made a part of the Registry of Historic Places in 1994. It closed down in 2003, and the remaining patients were transferred to Westboro State Hospital. Since then, the town of Medfield has worked to preserve the remaining buildings and kept the campus open as a public park. Naturally, several urban legends and ghost stories have sprung up about the place over the years, one of which being the origin of this basketball court. The story goes that in the 1960s, a young patient named Jimmy was sent back home to his family after being treated at the hospital for a few years. During and before his stay, he was totally nonviolent. However, immediately after being returned home, he stabbed his parents to death. He was sent back to the hospital, specifically Building 13, which was a fenced off and more secure building for the possibly dangerous patients. Apparently, he wasn't happy with less space and tighter security, so it was for him that they built the basketball court. Also interesting is that close to Building 13 is Building 27, where several members of the infamous Boston crime family, the Winter Hill Gang, were locked up at various times. Next, we have the Infirmary and Vocational Building. There have been several ghost sightings through the years at Medfield State Hospital, but as far as I can surmise, there hasn't been one or two specific ghosts that people report seeing more than once. However, the Infirmary Building and the old Vocational Building are the buildings most consistently referenced in these stories. People have mentioned unexplained bad smells, phantom voices, and a pervasive feeling of being watched. There have also been several accounts of people hearing footsteps and clanking coming from inside the buildings, even though most of the buildings on campus are completely boarded up. I myself heard some shuffling noises coming from this building while I was filming for this documentary, but of course some animals might have slipped through and set up shop here. The hospital is also well known as a filming location, being used in Shutter Island, and most recently, New Mutants. The cast and crew of New Mutants had some pretty strange experiences there as well, with one crew member reporting that while she was fixing up the lights alone, she heard a whisper directly in her ear, but when she turned around to look, there was no one else in the room. Director Josh Boone said that she had to be escorted to her car every night since she was too scared to walk alone, and she wasn't the only one. The director claims literally every single person on my crew, all my grips, all those people had weird things happen to them while they were there. Our next location is Vine Lake Cemetery. As mentioned before, there are many people buried here, both from Medfield State Hospital and elsewhere, who died from the influenza outbreak of 1918, but the cemetery is much older than that. It was first established in 1651, the year the town was incorporated. The oldest dated marker is from 1661, and it is still being used today. It remains Medfield's only public cemetery. You might expect more ghost stories from a location like this, but the story I'm going to tell you is, I think, much more unusual. In an unmarked and presumably unoccupied tomb in Vine Lake Cemetery, fresh flowers could be found every so often, laid out overnight by a mysterious visitor. As this phenomenon became more well known, and people started to get occasional glimpses of the visitor, a legend grew that a witch had set up shop in the tomb, visiting occasionally to presumably brush up on spellcasting and test new potion formulas. This urban legend existed for years, but as a matter of fact, we now know exactly what was going on here, and I am sorry to report the real explanation has disappointingly few sorcerers. As it turns out, the tomb that the vast majority of the town thought was empty wasn't. It's the Langley family tomb, and the witch that would visit was named Marjorie Langley Ryan. She was a socialite from New York, and would come back to Medfield and visit the tomb of her grandparents and parents sometimes. This mystery was only able to be solved by Rob Gregg, president of the Vine Lake Preservation Trust, contacting a local funeral home and getting a copy of the woman's will, where she requested to be buried with her family members. Another mystery that this cemetery holds is these stones. For years, no one knew what these stones were for, or why they had these holes carved into the middle of them. But again, this is a mystery we now actually have an answer to. These holes were made so that a stick of wood with more information on the deceased could be placed into the stone, but over the years the wood has rotted away, leaving empty holes. This was a common practice among the very early settlers. Next, we're going to be exploring the woods, and maybe we'll meet some of the mischievous residents. Pukwudgies are a mythological creature from Wampanoag folklore that live in the woods. According to legend, Pukwudgies were once on good terms with humans, but once the humans started paying more attention to Mashop than them, the Pukwudgies got jealous and became mischievous and sometimes dangerous. Pukwudgies can turn invisible, shapeshift, and use magic and make fire in order to play tricks on humans who annoy them. They are also known for following humans, continually causing trouble for them, as well as sinister tricks such as kidnapping people, pushing them off cliffs, stabbing them, or throwing sand in their eyes to blind them. Pukwudgies are mostly considered to live throughout the northeast United States, Great Lakes region, and southeastern Canada. The reputation for being tricksters who could be murderous or helpful depending on their mood mostly comes from the lore of the Wampanoag tribes of southern New England. In the Ojibwe and other Great Lakes tribes, Pukwudgies are considered to be mischievous but basically good-natured. And in the Abenaki and other northeast Algonquin tribes, a Pukwudgie can be dangerous, but only to people who treat him with disrespect. They have been reportedly sighted in various areas of Massachusetts, including Freetown, Raynham, and Norwell. For our last story, we're going to be taking a little trip to a town that borders Medfield, Dover. On April 21st, 1977, 17-year-old Bill Bartlett was driving down this road in Dover, Massachusetts, when he reportedly saw a strange creature on one of the old stone farm walls in the woods. He described it as having tendril-like fingers and huge glowing eyes. Another kid, 15-year-old John Baxter, reported a sighting of a similar creature that same evening on Miller Hill Road. The following night, one more teenager reported a sighting, 15-year-old Abby Bramham. She claims to have seen the creature here, on Springdale Avenue. The only thing that worries me is the story of Bill Bartlett, Police Chief Carl Sheardon said at the time, telling the press he was an outstanding artist and a reliable witness. The three witnesses did not know each other well. Two of these witnesses were made to draw sketches of the creature by the police. This is the sketch John Baxter made when he spotted the creature walking down the road on two legs. Bill Bartlett was a well-known amateur artist in his community at the time, and his sketch has become the most well-known depiction of the alleged creature to date. "It scared me to death. I couldn't go back and see it," said Bartlett. The creature was described by the witnesses as being 3.5 feet tall, with a white head, rough skin, and eyes that glowed when the light was shined on them. The three roads it was sighted on make a straight line across about 2 miles of Dover, in the middle of which are the Chase Woodland and Rice Conservation Land. There are several theories as to what exactly those kids saw, ranging from a baby moose, or a horse foal, to a dog or fox suffering from mange, to an alien creature of some kind. That's all for Medfield Facts and Fiction. I'm Karen Aid.